we step into the shadows and into a world of covert operations, secret societies, and the forces that shape history behind closed doors. Welcome to a journey into the unknown by our guest, Rick Spence. Welcome.
Hello. It's my pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have a guest like you here. And you have studied and searched mystifying and sometimes disturbing world of brotherhoods, sisterhoods, orders, cults, and cabals, espionage that have influenced culture from ancient times to the present. So, for the past 200 years, secret societies and intelligence agencies have played a crucial role in shaping political power and public perception. While enlightenment and hidden knowledge were once their main focus, their influence appears to be more about control and governance. How have secret societies influenced intelligence agencies and governance? It's my first question.
All right, well, let's start out with one of the things I always like to bring in is a definition so that we know what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Because terms like secret societies and others can be, or cult, there's a term for it. What exactly is a cult?
Yeah.
Generally, it's some religion you don't like. That's often what it comes into. A cult is some group of people that you disapprove of. Mm-hmm. But it can sort of have some sort of specific meaning. So let's go back to secret society.
Yeah.
One of the main things about secret societies is that more often than not, their existence isn't a secret. So let me use as an example probably the biggest, the most successful fraternal order that's existed since the 18th century, and that's Freemasonry. Mm-hmm. So Freemasonry exists throughout the world. It exists in Turkey. It exists in Western Europe and Britain. It was spread by the British Empire, the United States. At one point in the early 20th century, back when the population of the United States was less than 100 million people, 5 million men belonged to the Masonic order. So it was very widespread, very influential. So its existence wasn't a secret. Everybody knows about it. And that's still the same thing today. If you're driving in the USA and you go into most towns, as you approach a town, there'll generally be a signboard that will tell you what kind of organizations are in that town. And the Freemasons, if they've got a lodge, are going to tell you that this is the lodge, here we are. So they don't hide their existence. Now, in the case of some secret societies, that's true. They try to stay really behind the scenes and don't want a lot of people knowing about them. But Freemasonry and most other sort of general initiatory orders advertise their existence. The secret part is what goes on inside. That's what the secret part is. So, one of the things about a secret society, whether it's Freemasonry or others, is that they are selective in their membership. Not everyone can join. There's nothing democratic about this. It's not like everybody has a right to be a Freemason. No, they choose. Each lodge selects its members. So someone generally within the lodge sponsors you as a member. We think this guy could be a member. That then goes before the other members of the lodge, and then they vote among themselves as to whether that person gets in. Traditionally, it can vary, but traditionally, if one person in the lodge votes against them, they're not in. Everyone has to agree upon the admission of a new member. Now, once that person has been selected, so this is secret societies are selective in their membership. They choose their members for reasons that are itself somewhat secretive. I mean, you don't know exactly why you were chosen, other than the fact that they saw in you something they wanted within their group. So that's a secretive part. The next thing that happens is that when you're brought in, you go through a series of initiations. There are a series of rituals. Mm-hmm. So in ordinary Freemasonry, what's called Blue Lodge Freemasonry, the thing that 99% of the people that go into Freemasonry go into, There are 3 different initiations at 3 different levels. So the bottom level is that you are an apprentice, and then you become a fellow craft. That's the middle level. And then you become a master mason at the top. And there are initiations for all 3 levels, and there are these fairly elaborate sort of pantomime rituals you go through. I mean, there's all kinds of weird stuff. You know, you get a noose put around your neck, and you're blindfolded, and you see a skeleton in a coffin. All right.
Yeah.
From the outside, it actually looks kind of silly. Okay, so it's one of those things that if you didn't take it seriously, you could laugh at because it just looks like grown men doing silly things. But they take it very seriously. But at each one of those stages, at each initiation, you are sworn to secrecy to never divulge the secrets of Freemasonry. Never talk about what goes on within the lodge. And that is emphasized again and again and again. So that, I'd argue, is what really makes a secret society. Not that their existence is secret, but that what they do within the organization is secret. So if you join a group, you know, if somebody selects you to be part of a club, and then they make you swear to secrecy, you've just joined a secret society. Now, there are lots of that basic model I've described is just used elsewhere. So one of the things, you know, I don't know about Turkish universities, but in American universities, there are student organizations.
Like
here they're called fraternities and sororities. Sororities are women's organization, fraternities are men's organization. They're never mixed. I mean, occasionally you have ones where men and women are together, but usually those are separate. And those are student organizations, and they exist on most American college campuses. They have a European origin. You find them at German universities, the British universities, very common. And it's the same sort of thing. They choose their members, okay? They pick who gets in, and then you're sworn to secrecy, and there are various rituals of initiation. And they all identify themselves by Greek letter names. In fact, that's what this is often called, the Greek system. Okay? It has nothing to do with actual Greeks. But they're letters, so there will be something like, Alpha, Gamma, Sigma will be the name of that particular, or Sigma Chi. Now, what those Greek letters mean, which are always in the front, they tend to have their own private houses that they live in, and they'll have these Greek letters in the front of the house. That also has a kind of secret meaning. So the Greek letters refer to Greek words, which are a kind of motto, but that's one of the first secrets that you have, what the actual name of the organization is. And people join fraternities and sororities because the argument is that you make friends for life. You know, you go to school with people, you live together, you carry out, in some cases, criminal actions together. You do all of this secret stuff that you're not supposed to do. And it should be mentioned that fraternities and sororities are often very harshly criticized. People who aren't in them don't like them. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we're talking about secret societies, right? Because we're not in them. I'm not. Okay, I'll tell you, I don't belong. I don't want to belong to them.
Skulls and Bones is one of that groups in the universities because they said.
Well, it's a collegiate secret society, but it's not a fraternity. It's a senior society. So in a fraternity, you generally join when you first go to college. So in American universities, first year students are referred to as freshmen. There are 4 years of college. So you're a freshman, then you're a sophomore. That's number 2. Why? I don't know. That's just the way they do it. And then you're a junior, and then you're a senior. So senior is your last year. See, it's kind of like a secret society. They have little names. So in a fraternity, you join as a freshman, and you're in the fraternity all 4 years, unless you get kicked out. But in a senior society like Skull and Bones, that only exists in the senior year, And there are only, in Skull and Bones, for instance, there are never more than 15 people in it at any one time. So people are chosen, again, with the existing group. And so at the beginning, I think at the end of your junior year, before your last year of college begins, members of the club go around to the selected members and they knock on their door in the morning. And they tell you that you've been chosen to be a member of Skull and Bones. And then you're brought down to their
Initiation.
house and you go through initiations. But you're only in it in that last year. So that's not quite, it's a different kind of fraternity. And there are only 15 people in it. But again, the key point is that they carefully select who those 15 people are. They're all chosen for, so it's considered to be a great honor to be selected. I mean, part of this just has to do with human psychology. We like being.
You are taken to the web. It's like a web, and you are taken to the web. And I think after you are taken, you cannot go out easily.
Well, Skull and Bones, their house is called the Tomb. And, there's skull, and they supposedly have a collection of human skulls. All right. That's what they're supposed to have. Now, you have to remember that although these organizations are on college campuses, they're private organizations. They're not part of the university. They're a private club that exists on there. So given that they're private, you can't go in. I mean, there are people who join fraternities to figure out what's going on. And in the same way that I knew someone who decided that they were going to become a Freemason just so they could figure out what was going on. And they were disappointed because they came to the conclusion that other than going through what appeared to be these kind of silly rituals and stuff, that was it. I mean,
Robes and hats and
that was it. Okay? But we don't have this meeting where we sit around, okay, this is how we're going to take over the world. No, it's just, and the thing about these organizations is that very often, I think, it's true for most of Freemasonry, and it's true for fraternities and sororities. No matter how much people on the outside suspect that they're doing, okay, here's what we on the outside don't like about them. They're keeping us out. You pick to join. So they're doing something in there, and they're doing it secretively. And if people do things secretly, we assume that they're up to something bad, don't we?
Yeah.
Because we assume that they don't want anyone else to see this because they're trying to hide something. And therefore, it must be bad. It must be criminal or immoral. Could be. It also could be that that's just part of the mystery of the group. Make something seem mysterious, and people then become interested in it. So most of these groups that are called secret societies are harmless. I mean, they're not really, they don't have any real power. They're not doing anything, but they can. Because here's where arguably a kind of dangerous element comes in. So remember that I said in Freemasonry and in other groups, even in fraternities and sororities, members are chosen for some sort of unspoken reason by the existing group. So what you create within a secret society, within a lodge, let's say, is you create a group of like-minded people. Now, the reason why you're picked to be a member is because the existing members think that you're going to contribute something to the group. They see qualities or ideas in you that they approve. So what you tend to get within a lodge is a group of people who have very similar ideas. So their political ideas are probably much the same. Their religious ideas, if they have any, are probably much the same. But it also means that every lodge is different because every lodge is a kind of independent thing. It's a kind of separate animal. And each one selects its members for reasons that it has. So what's true for this lodge may not be true for another one. But what you get here, what do you get when you have a room full of like-minded people, let's say with very similar political ideas, and they're now in an organization which is private and they're sworn to secrecy. Well, let's suppose they wanted to do something else, like they wanted to plot to overthrow the government. Well, you now have a means to do that. And it just means that, it doesn't mean that Freemasonry itself has a political agenda. But the people within Freemasonry can have a political agenda. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example that you may know about, but in terms of Turkish history, if we go back to the early 20th century, around that period, you get a thing called the Young Turk Revolution. Mm-hmm. Okay, when second is overthrown. And that's a military coup. If you notice that
Young Turk you talk about.
Yes, the Committee of Union and Progress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That whole revolution was plotted in a single Masonic lodge in Thessaloniki. Union and Progress were Freemasons. Now, and they used the cover of Freemasonry because the Sultan's government didn't really bother with it in order to carry out this revolutionary plan. Mm-hmm. That is the case, and there are other revolution. Italian nationalism, German nationalist movements were largely run by Freemasons. Mm-hmm. There's a heavy Masonic influence in the Russian Revolution. In fact, show me a revolution, and you'll find Freemasons involved in it in one form or another, because simply that the Masonic lodges become convenient places for political conspiracy. Mm.
Then at that time in all the world, there was a movement.
You had a lot of people who wanted to change the world. Mm-hmm. That was an idea. So if you look again at the beginning of the 20th century, you've got ideas floating around. You've got, remember the world was still largely dominated by monarchies.
Yeah.
Germany, a monarchy. Ottoman Empire, a monarchy. Everywhere you turned. I mean, there was only like one significant republic. That was France, and that was almost a monarchy. So notice that there was a very big change that happened over about 20 years. So in 1900, if you looked at Europe and the Near East, if you looked at this whole area, it was politically dominated by monarchies that had been around for centuries in some cases. Mm-hmm. In the aftermath of the First World War, 20 years later, most of those monarchies were swept aside. German monarchy fell, the Russian monarchy, the Habsburg monarchy, the Ottoman monarchy, the Italian monarchy, the British monarchy has been the one that's hung on the longest. Yeah. And some could argue that the British monarchy has hung on as long as it has is because the British monarchy has a very close relationship with British Freemasonry. Most British kings, most men in the British royal family are Freemasons. And there's a difference between British Freemasonry and what's called continental Freemasonry, essentially French Freemasonry. So, and this, it brings up the complicated thing is that there are many different kinds of Freemasonry. Freemasonry is a house with many rooms. Mm-hmm. So in Britain, in the British Empire, Freemasonry is centered around a thing called the United Grand Lodge, okay, which is centered in London. And if you go to London, you can actually see it. And what it will have on the building is the date that it was founded, 1717. Doesn't say Freemason Lodge, it says 1717. That's the center of British Freemasonry. So lodges there, and in the United States, because of the colonial connection to Britain, American lodges are essentially an extension of that. But what happened there is that British royalty, the the monarchy itself became embedded in Freemasonry, and so Freemasonry was basically loyal to the monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in France and in much of the rest of Europe, it was very different. In France in the 18th century, the dominant lodge was a thing called the Grand Orient, the Great Eastern Lodge. Why? I don't know. That's the name they gave it. So it was the Grand Orient Lodge in Paris. And the Grand Orient Lodge hated two things, basically. One was the Catholic Church. They were very much opposed to the church. And two was the French monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And they are quite influential in the French Revolution. And notice one of the things that happens in the course of the French Revolution. One, the king is killed. They cut his head off. And then for a time, they set out to completely de-Catholicize and de-Christianize the country. You know, they're going to build this whole new sort of revolutionary religion, which doesn't work. But that's where those ideas come from. Those ideas came out of the French Lodge, which had long treated that monarchy and the church were the enemies of human freedom and we should overthrow them.
Mm-hmm.
You find the same kind of influences in the American Revolution, where many of the key figures, not all of them, but people like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, all Freemasons.
Freemasons.
The first president.
Then the answer of the question is very clear. Then they affect the intelligence agencies and, of course, the governance.
Well, one way to think of it is that an intelligence agency runs like a secret society.
Mm-hmm.
Because, first of all, how do you go to work for something like the CIA? You just don't walk in and fill out an application and go to work. You have no right to work there. You are chosen to work there. So if you want to go to work for the CIA, or I think the same thing would be true for Turkish intelligence, whatever, MI6, there's a long process of interviews, tests, lie detector tests, and then you are accepted. And then what do? You sign a secrecy agreement. You never talk about what it is that you do. See, it's exactly like a secret society. You're selected,
Mm-hmm.
you are tested and initiated, and then you are sworn to secrecy. That is one of the key elements, because what intelligence work is all about is essentially this. This is what spies do.
Yeah.
Spies attempt to steal vital information from their opponents, and they guard the information on their own side. So that's why intelligence agencies exist, to steal information
Mm-hmm.
from anybody, friends, enemies. I mean, in a certain degree, one of the ways you look at it in intelligence is that you don't have any friends. You have relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
You share common interests, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was once someone was talking about the British Empire. They said the British Empire doesn't have friends. It has interests. And to the degree that the interests of the British Empire happen to coincide with the interests of the United States, then we might be allies. But that could change tomorrow. So you never know.
Yeah.
You always have to spy on everybody. So this is why people are sometimes amazed to turn around and go that, your supposed allies are spying on you. Well, yeah, that's what they do.
Of course, there is espionage. Nowadays, media is considered a modern form of magic and it has power to manipulate people's perceptions. Is it possible to apply the principles of mind control not just to individuals but on a mass scale? And can we talk about the dark side of mind control experiment like Tavistock Institute, CIA, MK Ultra, and Stanford prison experiments?
Yes. Okay. They don't do it as openly as they used to. See, you were talking about in the 1950s and 1960s, the CIA ran a program broadly called MK Ultra. Now that was a code name. They'd come up with these code names. The code name itself doesn't mean anything, But in fact, MK Ultra was a whole set of programs. So if you look closely, there's MK Search, there's MK Naomi, there's MK Open, or Often. So it was actually a series of programs all under one sort of label. And it's usually said to have been about mind control. So I don't know, what do we mean by mind control? Well, the ability to manipulate the human mind on an individual or on a group level. Now, on an individual level, that meant things like using drugs and hypnosis, in particular hypnosis, to see if you could create a mind control assassin. And by the way, they really did that. Okay, that was a real thing. Then, of course, they would claim that, well, we were successful at it. You know, it never really worked. But that's the idea is that, can we take this person? Can we hypnotize them? Give them a kind of, create an alternate personality and have that alternate personality carry out a murder and then not remember what it was that they did. And among the surviving records, most of the records of MK Ultra were destroyed, which tells you something. But among those that survive, they succeeded in doing that.
They did.
They were able to take a young woman and through hypnosis have her take a gun, which wasn't really loaded, and shoot her friend. And then later, when she was taken out of the trance, have no memory of what it was that she had done. So the evidence suggests that they were fairly successful in manipulating a person to do something that, and by the way, this was a young woman who in her regular state was morbidly afraid of firearms. I mean, the normal woman couldn't even touch a gun. She was afraid of them. But under hypnosis, not only could she touch it, she could take it and shoot her best friend and then have no recollection of what it was that she had done. So that's mind control on the individual level. Then there's mind control on the mass level, where you're trying to manipulate the perceptions of an entire society. Now, how do you do that? Well, you do it. One of the things that's really made it easier to do is television. And now the extension of television, what we're on, the internet. Because it's this constant flow of information. Now, CIA figured this out fairly early on. They figured out that it was about, that they actually had a program which was called Project Mockingbird. So what Project Mockingbird was about was recruiting assets in the media. Now, that meant things like news reporters, especially on television, journalists that worked at important newspapers. So, for instance, let's take probably one of the most influential newspapers in the United States is the New York Times. New York Times was, there are others, the Boston Globe, papers in D.C., but the New York Times is probably the single most important source of information, at least for many educated people and people in government. So if you could influence the way that stories were covered in the New York Times, you could influence the perception of the people who read it. So what you would do is that you recruited journalists. And this was what Project Mockingbird was. It was recruiting journalists. It was offering them access to information. Remember, journalists always like a good story, right? Okay, you got to have information to do their job. Well, look, here at the agency, here at the CIA, we could leak you this story. This is a very important story, and you're just getting it from us. So we can make you special by giving you this story, but here's the way we want you to report it. So you're manipulating the journalist. You're using their vanity and their ego to get them to take information from you, and then you're crafting the way the story will go. And you're not doing this with one person, you're doing it with hundreds of journalists. And so you're beginning to influence the way that the news is covered, which means that you're influencing the way that the media talks about everything and that the way they talk about you. So you control the whole perception of the agency.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. You're familiar with the fictional British spy James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows who James Bond is. Well, you notice that those are based on stories written by a former British intelligence officer, Ian Fleming. But the way that we know it, most people actually know James Bond, is through the movies. Not many people actually have ever read Ian Fleming's books. I mean, some have, and if you read the books and see the movies, you realize that the movies are quite different. Okay, James Bond is a different character in the movies. And when Bond became very popular was in the 1960s. Early 1960s is when Sean Connery playing Bond, these movies began to come out and they produced more and more.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that coincides with, and here's one of these things always do in history when something comes up, is that never pay attention to just one thing. Always look around and see what else is going on at the same time. Okay, this is happening over here. What else is happening over here at the same time? Well, if you look at British intelligence in the early 1960s, one of the things that they had suffered for years was a series of devastating scandals. They were penetrated by Soviet agents. I mean, it went back to Burgess and McLean, and then eventually in '63, it's Kim Philby. Okay, so every time you turned around, there was some British intelligence agent who was found to be a Russian agent. So MI6 had a rather bad reputation. I mean, to the point that groups like the CIA really were quite leery of them because they were seen to be. The term was that British intelligence was a leaky ship. All right, it was not secure. So they needed an image makeover, right? Okay. British intelligence doesn't look good. We're infested with Russian agents. We can't be trusted. So what have we got here? Well, we got these films that came out with this heroic British agent, and he's very popular. So that's the image we want projected.
Mm.
So one of the groups which was behind the scenes encouraging and shaping the portrayal of James Bond in the movies was British intelligence because it was PR for them. So they want to get everybody's mind off the Philby scandal, and they want what is British intelligence? Well, it's Sean Connery. It's sexy. It's fast cars. It's beautiful girls. It's which is a complete fantasy. Okay.
Yes.
There's nothing like it. That is not the real world of espionage. It's a fantasy world which was created in order to improve the image in the public mind of a compromised organization. That's why we have, and then, of course, also made a lot of money for people, so they would go there. So intelligence organizations in and of themselves are secret societies. They operate in much the same way. You never talk about what goes on within the organization. So
can I ask you something? Can they control the mind by frequencies?
I did another interview, and one of the things I was asked about was something called Havana syndrome. Yeah, and it's this kind of strange illness that so it first showed up among American and Canadian diplomats in Havana, Cuba, about 2017. Mm-hmm. And people would start claiming that, well, I have headaches all the time, or I have double vision. I mean, it was all kind of like insomnia. I don't feel good. My ears ring. Okay. Now you got to imagine you're a doctor and someone comes to you and go, well, what's the matter with you? Go, I don't know, doc. I double vision. And sometimes I feel dizzy and my ears are ringing and I've got a headache. It's all this. So they tested people. And the idea was, is this some kind of poison? Is it a toxin? Didn't find anything. Is it some kind of an infection? Is it a bacteria or virus? Didn't find anything. And so the conclusion by doctors who examined people was that there was nothing wrong with them. And so they called it a psychogenic illness, which is a fancy way of saying that it's all in your head. you're imagining things. Okay, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just creating these symptoms, which can happen.
Yeah.
But then it began to increase. So it started in Havana with around 20 people. And as the years have gone on, I think as recently as 2023, more than 1,000 people, mostly American and Canadian diplomats or members of their family, serving around the world, have complained of these same symptoms.
Oh.
And so they go, look, I'm not making this up. There's something actually wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
But the official verdict is that we can't find anything wrong with you. The symptoms don't appear to identify anything, so we just think you're imagining things. Now, that could be true, although that can happen. It's a thing that sometimes under the idea of mass hysteria.
Mm-hmm.
One person sees something and then someone else gets it, and then, if you all sit around comparing your symptoms, then you all think you're sick with the same disease.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Have you ever taken a psychology class?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And a psychology class where there are a few lessons and they're talking about different forms of insanity. Mm-hmm. So like today we're going to talk about paranoid schizophrenia.
There are examples for this in the history.
But, what happens sometimes in college classes where people hear descriptions of mental illnesses, you start hearing these descriptions going, is that me? I don't know. That kind of sounds like the way I feel. Mm-hmm. So people can go through, and there have been people who simply hearing the description of a mental illness now think that they have it.
But it was 50 years ago. There can be something very different that we cannot even think about it. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, going back to this Havana syndrome thing, the question comes down to, is there something real going on? Mm-hmm. I mean, is there something that's actually afflicting these people? Or is it some kind of mass hysteria? Mm-hmm. Well, here, I'll introduce a theory of what I think it could be. Okay, notice I'm not saying this is what it is, but what it could be. And it comes back to this thing you mentioned of frequencies, of radio frequencies. Mm-hmm. So you can go on YouTube or the internet, and you can find there are all of these videos about different healing frequencies. Mm-hmm. So 432 megahertz is one of them. And it's all of it's the frequencies embedded in music. And what they'll tell you is that if you listen to this, especially with headphones on, it will cure you. It will cure insomnia. It will cure you it'll make you feel good. I will say that, I've listened to some of these, and I would say that there were some of them that if I listened to it for a while, did kind of make me feel good. Mm-hmm. So one idea is that if you listen to this frequency, that will cause your brain to release endorphins or dopamine, these kind of feel-good chemicals. And, I think that's possible. Mm-hmm. So let's assume that there's a certain reality to that there are frequencies that can be embedded in music or even in speech that can be hidden behind other sounds that can make you feel good. Mm. Well, then, logically, there must be the opposite of that, which means there must be frequencies that would make you feel bad.
Sick.
If there is a frequency that would make your headaches go away, there's another frequency which is going to cause those headaches. Yeah. That, by the way, is a basic principle in what we can call occultism, is the law of opposites. There must always be an opposite to anything that you have. Mm-hmm. So if there's light, there is darkness.
Duality.
There's always, if there's something that can heal, there is something that can kill. And in some cases, that can be the same. For instance, we know that there are chemicals, medicines, which very often what you take as a medicine to help you is something that if you took it in a larger amount would kill you. Mm-hmm. So at a certain level, this is toxic, but at a very small level, it's beneficial. There are sort of two aspects to it. So I think that in the modern environment, where I think this began with motion pictures. I think this all began with movies back in the 1920s, where you could get hundreds of people sitting in a room in the dark, watching the same image on screen. That then turned into television. And now television has essentially become the internet, this whole vast world of images and sounds that can be projected. And the ability to manipulate those sounds and images for particular purposes is real. It can be done. To what purpose is the real question. What is it that you're being made or influenced to believe? I mean, here's the type of thing. You can go on the internet, you can listen to different things, and you'll just get this barrage of information. Mm-hmm. And one video will tell you this is true, and here's evidence for it. Mm-hmm. Another video will say that, no, that's not true, and here's evidence why it isn't true. So your mind is constantly being bombarded with things which are contradictory to each other. Mm-hmm. And one of the impacts of that could be making it very difficult to believe anything. That you're in a situation which I think is, maybe the most practical. My advice would be, don't take anything for exactly what it is. That's always be aware of the fact that you can be, and probably are to some degree, being manipulated. Well, here's an obvious example. You go on the internet and you go, advertisements. All right? Advertisements, ads, commercials are simply there to get you to buy something. Aren't they? That's what they're there to do. Mm-hmm. And they're there to make that product seem to be necessary or enticing or sexy or whatever it is. But when you watch a commercial, you are being psychologically manipulated to buy that product.
So you can feel better.
Yes, because it will improve. You'll be a happier, prettier person if you have this. So advertisements, but we kind of know that. We know that advertisements are lying to us. It's a lie because they're just trying to sell their product. That's all. Mm-hmm. And man, have you ever seen a commercial and tried to figure out exactly what they're selling? No. I mean, sometimes it's not even, it happens a lot in sort of things like phone ads and the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how different actually is one cell phone from another? They're just like little rectangles, okay? They do the same thing. They don't do anything differently. So you have to try to make this one appear to be more hip and with it than the other one is. And so you've got all of these like happy, pretty young people with these particular phones, and somehow if you possess that, you will have those kinds of qualities. That's manipulation.
No, that's it.
So advertisements, we know, are lies. But then we watch other things like the news, and we assume that we're not being manipulated. Why wouldn't you be?
Of course. And collective.
on a collective level.
Yeah.
So these things always operate on different. There's a kind of mass level, kind of mass projection. Mm-hmm. And then there's the kind of more individualized groups. So one of the things that I think is interesting, if you go back and particularly look at motion pictures, if you look at film, is that every film is a ritual that you're participating in. Mm-hmm. So, and that gets us back to this idea of a definition. So, well, what's a ritual? A ritual is simply a series of actions performed in a particular sequence, in a particular time, in a particular place, in a particular way. Mm-hmm. So it's a choreographed creation. As you go to any kind of ritual, and things are done according to a plan. One step follows the other one. You know, a Masonic initiation ritual is a series of actions carried out in a sequence in a particular way. But also, the most important part is that a ritual is meant to evoke a response in the observer. So the reason that you participate in a ritual is to partake of some kind of spiritual enrichment or some sort of sense of fellowhood, but rituals evoke a response in the observer.
Like power.
Like power. So when you go to see a movie,
Mm-hmm.
when you go to the theater and you're watching a film, you're participating in a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything you're watching there isn't real. And this is a kind of interesting thing. You go and you watch a movie and you like it, but you do this kind of interesting psychological manipulation on yourself. All right, you know on a certain level that you're sitting in a theater, that what's happening on screen, those are actors, okay? That's Brad Pitt, okay? That's Brad Pitt. That's Angelina Jolie. You know who these people really are. You know that nothing you're seeing is real. It's all fake, all right? It's just pretending, okay? No one's actually being killed. It's just pretend death and destruction. It's just, they're not in love with each other. They're just pretending to be. Everything you see in the movie is crafted. It's created to create an emotional response in you. It's completely fake. But you, the observer, you're into it. You believe it. I mean, you couldn't enjoy the movie if you didn't.
Yeah.
But you get into the movie, and so remember, you're doing this to yourself. Your brain is sort of turning off the part that goes, this is all fake. And it's now going, oh, and so when things happen, you cry at the sad parts. Okay. Notice very often there's music there's sad music that comes in that's cueing you to be sad. You're being completely manipulated through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. You're being manipulated to the point that you accept falsehood for reality. Now, here's the thing to consider. How many other places in your life, in different ways, is the same thing happening to you, and you're even less aware of it? I mean, if you can be fooled essentially what is happening when you're watching a movie is a process of self-hypnosis.